So welcome to another webinar, another YouTube video of R.E.S.T Center's Black Youth Matter Peel series. Now, today we are so lucky to have Allison Pryce from the Canadian Mental Health Association, Peel Dufferin. We are going to discuss mental wellness and self-care, especially coming out of the COVID. I know we're opening up, but there's a lot of trauma and a lot of things that we've been through. Now we're coming to the end of the stress cycle, and we need to do a lot more self-care now than we even had to do during the pandemic as we're opening up. So I'm so excited to host this. R.E.S.T Centers is located in the Peel region. We help homeless and at-risk youth in the Peel region, 18 to 24, helping them with life skills training, housing subsidies, permanent housing, as well as basic needs with grocery cards. So if you need to get in touch with us, please do. Our number is 905-863-1118, or you can go to our website at restcenters.org. We also have a donate button for those who want to support youth in the Peel region, 18 to 24. Help us, we get housing. You know, you could donate a grocery gift card, which really helps our youth. And also the life skills program. This is part of the life skills programming. So I'm going to hand it over now to Allison. Thank you again for partnering with us. Thank you for helping the youth. I know you do so much work in the Peel and Dufferin area. And I just want to say thank you for doing this for us today.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for, inviting me into your virtual space and giving me this opportunity to, not only connect with you, but connect with your youth. And, I'm hoping that in the near future, we can all reconnect in the community. But for now, we're thankful for at least this opportunity to connect virtually. As I facilitate this session and as we engage in this conversation, I do also just want to recognize that, I know a lot of us are, we are tired, we are at, our end, we are virtually exhausted, we are zoomed out, like we're over it. But, at the same time, it's still important that we stay connected and we continue to engage in these conversations because they are such an important and integral part of our lives, not even just, thinking about the pandemic, but I would say especially during this time, but ongoing. So what I want to talk to you about is mental wellness and self-care. As I was so nicely introduced, I'm Allison Pryce from C.M.H.A. Peel Dufferin, and I am in the YouthNet program, which is a program that offers workshops and presentations for youth on some mental health related topics. So today we're going to have sort of a general conversation. It's kind of going to be a fast conversation as well, where I'll talk a little bit about, the difference between mental health and mental illness, and we can maybe explore some of our stressors, some of our pain points, some of the things that we've been maybe thinking about and maybe struggling with. And I definitely want to leave you with maybe some solutions and some go-to strategies that you can utilize, whether you're thinking about that from a long-term perspective or you want something a little bit more immediate. And there's sort of those two ways to look at it. Long-term is always important. We want to continue to do things to maintain our health and our wellness. But at the same time, it can be very difficult to think about long-term, like what can I do now that's going to help me for the next month or 2 months or a couple of weeks or years. I need something right now as I'm feeling anxious. I need something right now as I'm stressed out. What can I do right now while I'm feeling overwhelmed? So I want to sort of explore a self-care from those few perspectives. And in case you haven't talked about self-care before or really explored it a little bit, I'll sort of break down a few of those pillars and give you a little bit more of an understanding as to, what self-care is, because it is definitely beyond the bubble bath, right? It's beyond eating that chocolate bar. So we want to explore a little bit more about what that means for us. So the first thing that I want to sort of look at is mental health and mental illness, and just what might come to mind as you hear these terms. I find that when people think about mental health and when they hear mental illness, a lot of times they think of sorry, let me put it this way. When they hear mental health, they think of mental illness related terms. So as you hear mental health, you're thinking of things like, getting a diagnosis. You're thinking of things like going to the hospital, taking medication. Sometimes it's trauma. Right? Those things could connect with our mental health, but mental health and mental illness are two different things. And when we think about mental health, and when you think about mental health, I want you to think about some of those first thoughts that come to mind. Were you also thinking about, mental illness related terms? Or when you heard mental health, were you thinking of, maybe just positive terms? Someone is doing well, someone is thriving, right? Those are usually the two reactions that I tend to get when I hear mental health. But these two terms are used interchangeably. So it's really important that before we even get into some of these conversations, that we understand just even those basic differences between the two. So when it comes to mental health, I usually like to think about it from a physical health perspective, even in the way that I explain it. And for me, in my mind, I'm a little bit more visual. And for me, this makes a lot of sense. So when you think about your physical health, what is your status? What would you consider your status to be? Is it, is it good? Is it not so great? Is it any of that, gray area in the middle? If you were like me, I would say like me a couple of years ago, not as much now, but if you were like me, you might even consider yourself to be more of the seasonally physically healthy person, which means, in the summertime, you're out, you're walking, you're going to maybe festivals, you're a lot more active. But when it comes to the winter, you might be hibernating a little bit. You're not as active, you're not as mobile. Right? Not because you don't want to, but sometimes it's just not that motivation to. Sometimes other things take our priority, they take up our time, and we are unable to commit to, those goals of being physically active. Okay, but we have that physical health status. I want you to think of your mental health the exact same way. So mental health is more than the absence of illness. It's a state of well-being, it's a state of mind. Okay, we all have it. Sometimes when I hear mental health, I hear it in a context of, it's what these individuals are dealing with or other people deal with. Okay, we all have mental health, and it's more than just, surviving. It also has to do with thriving, feeling like we have maybe some meaning and purpose in our lives, being able to manage our, common everyday ups and downs, life's stressors, right? So we have these, large pillars of our health and wellness. When you think about, mental health, you think about physical health, you think about your environmental health, you think about maybe your social health. For some of you, maybe even your spiritual health. These are very important staples of your health that make you complete, that make you feel whole, and that help you to thrive in your daily life. So when it comes to your mental health, it's really all about how you think and how you feel, which can really influence how you behave. And I want you to just think about this for a second. Just pause and reflect. The last time that you were in a positive state of mind and you were maybe around some family, some friends, just some individuals, when you were in that positive state of mind, how did you behave? Right? What were your thoughts like? What were your actions like? Chances are you were laughing, you were having a good time, you were being a little bit silly, maybe playing around, right? But I want you to think about the last time that you were in a not so positive state of mind. You were feeling really angry, you were feeling frustrated, you were feeling down, you were feeling low, you were feeling in pain emotionally. How did those behaviors play out? Chances are you weren't that happy-go-lucky, thriving, playful individual, because we really recognize that a lot of times our thoughts and our feelings and our moods directly impact and influence our behaviors. So we want to be mindful of that as we continue to pay attention to our mental wellness and our mental state of mind. And you might even realize that, during this past oh gosh, what are we in? I want to say maybe a year and a half, over this past year and a half, that your mental health has been significantly impacted more than maybe some previous years, even if it was impacted in previous years as well. Okay, what is a mental illness though? So what is that difference? So mental health is that overall, that general state of mind, but what's the difference now when someone has a mental illness? So this is actually having that, diagnosed disorder from the appropriate healthcare professional. And it's again looking at an illness that affects your mood, your thinking, and your behavior. So every single one of us has mental health concerns, especially when you're looking at it from that perspective of, have you ever felt stressed out? Of course. I feel like that's like COVID 101. That was like stress was definitely at the top of our list. Have you ever felt overwhelmed? Have you ever felt anxious? Have you ever felt burnt out? Have you ever felt, I don't even know another descriptive word at the moment, but all of those feelings, chances are we have all felt at some point. So every single one of us has mental health concerns. And when those concerns start to impact our ability to function in our daily lives, when those mental health concerns are going or continuing for a long period of time and really impacting our ability to function, not only on an everyday basis, just our overall ability to function. That doesn't necessarily mean we have a mental illness, but it does mean that this is a good time to start making those connections to other individuals, because chances are things are becoming a little bit more overwhelming for us to handle. And when it comes to youth and young adults, the four most common, most prevalent diagnosed mental illnesses are depression, are eating disorders. In fact, eating disorders have been a really big issue over the course of this pandemic. Eating disorders, depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. There are definitely other mental illnesses that youth and young adults struggle with, but those are the top diagnosed ones, at least before the pandemic. I'd have to see if anything has changed, but that data just sort of wouldn't be out at this point. In there as well with anxiety is also a lot of trauma, and depending on who you're speaking to, it could be related to, different intersectionality, which means, the different layers of what make us who we are. Sometimes those layers of trauma can really root deep within us, right? So as I think of myself and my intersectionality, I think of myself as a straight, Black, able-bodied, middle-class female. And what does that mean for me as I try to navigate my mental health and reach out for support and connect with others, etc. So there are so many different layers of, what make us us and what could influence us to, experience mental health concerns or have a diagnosed mental illness. And even if everyone who is watching this video had the same diagnosis, the way that we react to that diagnosis could be very different. Some people might need medication, not everyone does. Some people might have one episode, some people could have episodes for a long period of time. So it can really, really change depending on the individual. So for anyone who's a bit more of a visual learner, I like to use this diagram because it really just helps us to understand how we all fall on, this mental health continuum. So I'll use my cursor just so that you can sort of follow along with me. So this is saying that someone can have a diagnosis of a mental illness, but still have very positive mental health. So even if someone has a diagnosis, or even if you have a diagnosis, it doesn't mean that, you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you are doomed. It doesn't mean that you have bad mental health. It means that you have a diagnosis of a mental illness. Okay. And chances are at this point in our lives, you probably even know someone with a diagnosed mental illness, and maybe that person is also doing well. If you can't think of someone personally, can you think about it from a media perspective? Someone who has talked openly about their struggles with their mental health and how they have gone through that sort of process of recovery, how they've received support, how they've tried to strive for mental wellness. Okay. Over here, so you can have no mental illness and have positive mental health. So no diagnosis, you're doing great. What is COVID? I don't care. I like wearing my pajamas all day. I got no kids to stress me out. I don't know. For whatever reason, things are just going really well for you. Down below, someone can have a diagnosis of a mental illness and have poor mental health. So as a result of their diagnosis, they've really been struggling. And no diagnosed mental illness, but maybe poor mental health. So this is where I find a lot of people even see themselves, especially over this past year and a half, where maybe they have no diagnosis, but at the same time, they recognize that because of the different things that they are dealing with, their mental health is struggling. Sometimes I'm waking up worried. Sometimes I'm waking up stressed out. Sometimes I'm feeling anxious. I'm thinking of my health, my finances, my family, my children, my job, a roof over my head. I'm thinking about all of these different layers, right? And that's affecting my mental health. So hopefully that description helped you to understand at least a little bit more of that difference between mental health and mental illness. So when we think about mental health and, what we have been, dealing with over the past, whether you want to look at it as a year and a half or over the past couple of years or even couple of months or couple of weeks, there have been many, many stressors that have been on people's plates. And so I just wanted to explore a couple of them. And I wanted you to maybe use this opportunity to maybe think about some of the stressors or the pain points that you might be dealing with. So, as I see this list, I know that a lot of individuals have been feeling, anxious. They've been feeling stressed out, angry, frustrated. There have been a lot of individuals who have been dealing with, changes in their routine. School has been a struggle. It's and when I think of school, there's so many different layers. It's how do I wake up in the morning? How do I get that motivation to sign on? How do I not feel bored? How do I keep myself motivated to keep going? How do I make the grades? How do I stay connected when I don't even really know my teacher or my classmates because we've kind of been virtual for a while now? There's so many different layers of school. How do I deal with these missed opportunities? I'm graduating. I'm thinking about the future. There's so many different layers of just even school when I think about it. How do I or why do I find it difficult to, hand in my schoolwork? Why do I find it difficult to be a good student or to be a positive person when traditionally I would be this way? Right. So a lot of us have been just struggling with our mental health because of so many changes. And usually when it comes to stress, it is brought on or we feel stress when um, our resources do not match our stressor. So we don't feel like we have enough resources or that ability to deal with the stressor. That's when stress really starts to manifest and starts to sort of escalate and grow in our bodies. Okay. So I'm hoping that I do have an opportunity to maybe even follow up with a few of you at a different time, but at the same time, you might also have a chance to follow up with your leaders at R.E.S.T centers to even explore some of the things that stress you out. And as we explore some of these coping strategies, I'm hoping that maybe you can connect to some of them and find ways to incorporate them into your lives. So as you think about stress and as you think about how it reacts in you, I want you to look at these experiences, okay? These signs and symptoms and see, do you see yourself? Do you see yourself? Take a look and do you recognize yourself in any of these signs and symptoms? There's a good chance that you do. Many of them are very, very common. But I just want you to look at this list and again, reflect on yourself. If you've been noticing a lot of these things, is this an opportunity to pause for a minute and reflect on, opportunities for change? What are some things that I can do to help shift these feelings? Do I have any control? Right? I might not be able to control the pandemic. I might not be able to control specifically where I live right now at the moment, but what do I have control over in my life? Okay, I want you to think about that. Because stress comes from different areas of our lives. Okay, and it can really affect us in different ways, and things that, you know, stress you out might not have the same effect on someone else. And we want to remember that, right? Especially as we continuously look to connect to each other and we look to reach out to others. Okay, if anyone is connecting with us and talking to us about their stressor, we want to make sure that we are validating the things that they are going through. And if we are talking to someone about things that are stressing us out, we want to make sure that we are feeling validated. So we want to explore, who is it that we can talk to? Who is it that can validate us? Who is it that can really listen to us? And we want to make sure that we are paying attention to, again, those reactions to stress that our body is communicating to us, right? Are we having
Okay, we have a little freezing going on. One moment. So while we're waiting for Allison to unfreeze, I love the fact that she actually said, you know, look at what we can control and what we cannot control, and stress over what we can't control. That can happen a lot in our lives. I know our youth, you know, you might not be in the ultimate living situation at first, but the good news is you can control about how you can make that change, for example. So what I was trying to say is, you know, how do I get my education? How do I get my other, you know, a better job in order to change my living situation? So these are the things that you can do. So I'm going to wait for Allison to come right back in. So I think something happened with the internet, and we'll be right back. So Allison, one of the things I was reiterating was that control and not control. Control, we're stressing over what you can control and what you can't control. And I gave the example of right now, if you are not liking where you're living or your living situation, that's something you can't control. However, you can control getting your education. You can control getting a better job in order to change the situation that you can't control. So that's what I was saying before you came back. So welcome back, and I hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much. And speaking of things that you can't control, I can't control this blasted internet connection. But I'm so happy it just like hopped back on. I'm back with everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience with the technical difficulties, but we'll get right back into the session. So, I just want to pause for a minute and think about self-talk, because, I ask youth all the time, how many of you talk to yourselves? And the amount of youth who say, you know what, no, I don't talk to myself, is so hilarious. And I always let them know you are misinformed. Every single person talks to themselves. There's just different levels. There's internal dialogue, right, in your mind, and there's external dialogue where you might actually be speaking out loud. I speak out loud to myself all the time. I think it has to do with the fact that I am the youngest sibling. I was used to playing with myself, playing like by myself all the time. I didn't have always my sibling around. And also, I always have a lot of things just on my mind. And so I find that I'm speaking to myself out loud a lot just to even make sense of it, right? What do I need to do today? Am I feeling hungry, right? We just randomly speak to ourselves. And I find that sometimes when we speak to ourselves, we can be, not the nicest individuals. In some ways, negativity can cling to us like Velcro. It's so easy to, or it can feel easier to, pump out the compliments. Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. Thank you for being such a good friend. I really like your sweater, whatever we want to say to other individuals. But when it comes to speaking nicely about ourselves, a lot of times we really struggle. So as you look at this example of thoughts on the screen here, I want you to think about, how is it that you usually speak to yourself? The way that you speak to yourself absolutely impacts the way that you think and feel about yourself, your self-esteem, right? Your self-worth, which can absolutely trickle into that confidence, the relationships that you have with people, how you connect with others. So we might not realize that some of those subtle things that we say to ourselves, how they can really impact us, because you say something enough and you will start to believe it. So if you're saying a lot of negative things to yourself, you might find that you start to believe it. Or all it takes is for one person to hint at that negativity about you and you believe them right away, as opposed to knowing yourself and knowing some of that worth. Okay, so let's think a little bit about that self-talk and making sure that we're speaking kindly to ourselves. I'm not going to actually go through the slide. I wanted to actually just keep this up just so that you had an opportunity to see some long-term and short-term solutions. So some things that you can maybe look at doing, right now in those moments, taking breaks, making a list, getting organized, practicing mindfulness, and I'll chat about a little bit of these. And then some longer-term solutions in terms of, looking at your sleep pattern. And maybe I'll just pause on that last bullet, which is reframe your thinking, the 5x5 rule. So I'll explain this one to you. So what the 5x5 rule means is putting your situation into perspective. So let's say I'm stressing out about something. I might say something like, okay, Allison, if this is not going to matter, 5 years, 5 months, 5 weeks, 5 days from now, then I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes overly stressing about it, right? So it's kind of a combination of self-talk and putting your situation into perspective, because there are some things that we do need to hold on to and stress over, but there are also some things that we do hold on to that we have the ability to let go of. Okay. All right. So let's just talk really quickly here about self-care. And self-care is really important because it really gives us that power to take control over, some aspects of our life and our health, and really looking at making some improvements. So it can really play that role in, reducing our anxiety and sometimes even saving us time and money, right? Because if we invest into ourselves now, that can prevent us or save us from having to, look at repairing some things later or working on some of that wellness later. So there are going to be a few pillars that I'll maybe discuss, but I wanted to just promote 2 strategies. So the first one is mindfulness, and the second one is looking at your sleep hygiene. And mindfulness is all about, learning how to be present, and looking at how can we accomplish this? Can we put our technology away? Can we do mindfulness practices and exercise? How are our sleep patterns? Are we getting enough sleep? Because if we are not, then we know that that absolutely impacts our energy the next day, which can impact our mood. Because again, our thinking and our mood and our thoughts impact our behaviors. So you want to make sure that we remember how everything ties together. So mindfulness is really just a type of meditation where you intentionally try and focus on the present moment, letting go of the past, not worrying about what's happening in the future. What do I know now? What do I have control over now? What can I do to quiet and calm my thoughts, steady my breathing, and focus on that positive? So if I do come back to maybe do a conversation with some of you, maybe we can do a little bit of mindfulness practices as well. Okay. We also want to make sure that we are mindful of the amount of sleep that we are getting. So I'll leave this slide up just so that you can sort of read along. There are some recommendations for how much sleep that you should be getting. So if you are not getting enough sleep, we want to try our best to take naps, take breaks, mental health breaks, do things to rest our mind and our body. If our body is constantly on that high alert, constantly in that fight or flight mode, constantly feeling stressed out, we are going to find that our energy is going to be depleted. We are going to find that our thoughts also might start to take a little bit of a turn, right? Where it starts to become a little bit more negative or difficult to manage and decipher, okay? All right, so there are different pillars of self-care that we can definitely explore. So we want to ensure that our knowledge and health literacy is definitely being looked after. And what that means is, using your skills that you have to gain access to understand and use information that we have to achieve good health. So for example, we maybe live in Peel region, we live in the GTA, we have a lot of access to services or information. It's important that we utilize those skills that we have to seek that information out to make sure that we are able to take care of ourselves. Okay, we also want to support our mental well-being, and this can include a few things like having satisfaction, feeling optimistic, improving our self-esteem, and feeling like we are in control. We want to be physically active, and we know what physical activity is. We know that we should be doing it, but are we doing it is the question. Okay, so we can always talk about physical activity more in another session if you'd like. I love talking about physical activity. Being healthy eating, we want to make sure that we are nourishing our bodies with the proper nutrients as best as we can. If we are looking at the fact that we don't have that much income or we are low income, that doesn't mean that we have to completely suffer with what we use to fuel our bodies. We can still find some strategies to, shop on a budget, eat healthy on a budget, even if there are some unhealthy things mixed in there. Okay. Good hygiene and rational and responsible use of self-care products and services. So anything that we are using to, take medication, we just want to also make sure that we are having those conversations with our pharmacist. We're taking the, appropriate or recommended dosage and taking care of ourselves in that sense. So there are different pillars to really look at and explore for when it comes to self-care. And I know that we've sort of gone over time, but I just want to fly through these last few slides here. Just wanting to give you a couple of other strategies for some everyday solutions to improve your mental wellness. So setting a routine is great for anyone who's feeling like they're really off or feeling really lost. A routine can help you feel like structured and grounded. Staying connected with individuals. Pay attention to some of those changes that could be happening with you. If you notice that you're having struggles with your mental health, write them down, make note of them. And if you ever, connect to individuals, you can, travel with your notepad or with your notes and say, hey, I've noticed these things. I've been concerned about this. Have you ever experienced these things? And you can even, look at some comparisons and see, is this a conversation that I want to take to my doctor? Okay. There's tons of ways that we can take a break. I actually just got this image off of Google. So if you're interested in this or want to see these solutions, you can just Google this image, 50 ways to take a break. Some really great everyday solutions that you can turn to. And, we want to make sure that we are reaching out. And reaching out can look very different for different people. It just boils down to, who do you feel comfortable with? Who do you feel like you can connect to? It's not always family and friends, to be very honest. I wish it always was, or I should say it isn't always blood family and friends. Sometimes it's an extended family and friends. Sometimes we are looking at our spiritual leaders. If that's feeling a little too close to home, can we look at, our community supports? Can we look at virtual supports? A lot of things have started up since COVID. So there are different ways that we can look at staying connected and getting that information and support if we need it. Okay, and one of the last things that I want to tell you is, this picture here, I feel like I got this picture at the beginning of the pandemic, and I've been using this for presentations pretty much since. I love this. This is so true to the past year and a half, but also just to life in general. Just because I carry it well, it doesn't mean it isn't heavy. Just because I make it to class on time, just because I hand in my homework, just because you see me taking care of my children, you see me smiling, you see me engaged virtually, just because I'm making some jokes, it doesn't mean that it isn't heavy and that some days are not difficult. Let's be real. These days have felt very difficult, and for some more difficult than any days that they've ever experienced before. So we just want to make sure that we are paying attention to our mental health. And if we by chance do need additional support, we reach out to whoever we feel most comfortable with and build that circle of support. It doesn't have to be just that family member or that friend. We can build a circle of spiritual leaders, community supports, virtual supports, and have a community of individuals who are actively trying to support one another. So, okay, I will leave it there. I'm so sorry. I know I went over time, but I'm hoping that at least the information was, something that at least you connected with a little bit. I'm not sure of everyone who's going to be, watching this presentation, but I'm hoping that we do have an opportunity to connect. And if anyone is interested in connecting with me, outside of doing some sort of a group, I'll ensure that I leave my communication and my contact with R.E.S.T centers as well. So I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Allison. This is amazing. I mean, you know, those watching, even I have learned a few things. Even I'm saying, hold on, I don't do that anymore, and I need to go back to doing it. You know, one of the things that I kind of jot down because our youth were asking questions. You know, how can I get access to resources? And you have it here, but that are relevant to me. So we have our youth who, you know, they come from a Caribbean background, they come from African background, and sometimes that generational and cultural gap has happened between them and their families,
Yeah.
which is a stressor
Oh yeah.
and can cause mental anguish. So how can we access that type of support that will understand where I'm coming from and the home I'm coming from, which is causing the trauma that I've faced, this, you know, the lack of self-confidence, those kind of underlining issues.
Absolutely. That is a really great question. And, you know, I've had different cultural questions asked, and I always love that one because that part of that connects to that first pillar of self-care, which was that knowledge and health literacy. So that looks at, again, utilizing our skills and our access to advocate for ourselves to learn about those resources that are available to us. So for example, individuals listening to this might recognize that you are a community support that they trust. They also recognize that you understand the culture piece, maybe even the religious piece. So you might be a go-to individual. But even if rest centers isn't the appropriate support, you in yourself could be a strong support where they can turn to you and say like, hey, are there any other places in the community I need support with? You know, my grandfather needs A, B, and C. You know what I mean? Like there's different needs as well. But then there's also us individually taking on a little bit of that ownership and responsibility to, you know, turn to our community to say, hey, you know what? I recognize that the last time I got help, it was nice help, but I would have really appreciated if I had another maybe racialized individual to speak to, just so that I felt like they connected or they understood what I was going through. So I'm going to, you know, take that upon myself to see where do I have that opportunity in my community. And one thing I can say is, you know, when it comes to, I think Peel Region, if I remember correctly, Peel Region, or maybe it's the GTA, has the largest Black population in all of Canada. So when it comes to supports and services, we are probably the most well-versed in what we have for marginalized and racialized communities. But it's a matter of looking for that support. And even myself, as a community worker, I'm still learning about things. You know, I was so fortunate enough to, you know, connect with R.E.S.T, but before this, I was actually, I had no idea about R.E.S.T, and I've lived in Peel for most of my life. So we are continuously learning, and that's part of the process, is to take it upon myself. Okay, I know that there's services in my community somewhere. What does that mean? What do they do? Let me call them. If I'm feeling shy, I know that I can also call and, you know, ask on behalf of a friend, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
mean that because we call that we need to be on medication or see a doctor or make an appointment. We just can call and get a little information.
true.
I also suggest to, you know, go on places' websites, because a lot of places are virtual now too. Look at their mission, look at their vision, and look at how they promote
Hmm.
supporting their community, and make sure that it lines up with your own vision and goals of your life. Because if you feel like what you believe in lines up with what they're trying to do, you're more likely to have a good, you know, experience and have some of that connection. So there's many ways of looking at connecting. Sorry, I feel like I went on a whole tangent
That's
there.
amazing. No, no, but you're right. You know, I think the biggest thing I take away from what you say is taking that ownership. And, you know, I can reflect on what living back home in Jamaica. I had children. I had a child. I have a child with autism. I have on the spectrum and ADHD. And I had to literally say, hold on, there must be somebody in this country that knows something that I need. And that's why I was almost like a bulldozer in finding information. And then coming up to Canada, many people are like, because I've just been up since 2018, and they said, how do you know these things? And it's exactly that mentality. So if we pass on anything today to our youth watching, always know there is a solution. You just have to look for it. And it's a lot easier nowadays with Google than it was in my day. And I'm not aging myself. I am not doing that. But it's a lot easier than just having to ask around, right? And you can now do it you can use Google. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or as you said, R.E.S.T center, you have me at R.E.S.T center who is that type of person, who you ask me where's that resource, and I'm not the only person at R.E.S.T center that's like that. There's a team of us that we're all very similar people, that if we will find it, don't worry. You know.
And even in regards to, advocating for yourself and seeking help and support, I just want to also say, depending on who you are as a person, how you feel about talking about experiences, feelings,
Yes.
emotions, that doesn't come easily for everyone. And I'll be very just real when I say this, not everyone has the most fantastic experience, because again, there are just many individuals out there. So just being realistic and saying, if you do reach out and it's not the experience that you wanted it to be, I just encourage you to please try your best not to be discouraged. Because there are many different people out there, and it's the same way as if you go and see a doctor. There are many doctors who, might just sort of look at you as a number and sort of push you through that appointment, but it just takes that one doctor to be like, okay, Allison, I'm not understanding this. Tell me a little bit more about your experience, who really wants to sit there and understand you more.
Amazing.
So if you have that experience, let's remember that that's not the one-stop shop. There are other
Yeah.
places you can turn to.
Excellent point. Can you pull up again the 7 pillars of self-care quickly? I just wanted to focus on a few things with that, because normally all you hear is eat right, exercise, and it kind of stops there. But you put up a lot more. And one of the things that, I mean, when you go to the stress cycle and ending the stress cycle, it also says about it speaks about friendship and having that person to talk to, but good hygiene. Now, we're in a pandemic. A lot of us are like, well, I'm not going to go see anybody, so I'm not going to, like, I'm not sweating, let me not bathe today, or I can't bother brush my teeth this morning. Why is good hygiene a pillar, an actual pillar of self-care?
Absolutely. So when we look at hygiene, we might not realize it, but again, that really connects with our mental health. If we stop sort of taking care of ourselves, we might find that again, it connects with some of that negative self-talk, that connects with our self-esteem, that can connect with our self-worth. Because when we stop, engaging in hygiene, especially when we did before, we start to have some of those thoughts of like, what's the point? Who cares? I'm not going to see anyone. And when we engage in that, that's not, holding ourselves to that higher standard of, taking care of our health. And again, if our health and our hygiene isn't well, that can also just play into other aspects of our health.
Yeah.
So not taking care of your hygiene, then your physical health can start to be impacted too. So we want to make sure that as we look at self-care, and this is why I also say, it's beyond the chocolate bar, it's beyond the bubble bath. I went to a workshop actually that said that self-care was beyond the bubble bath. And I remember when I heard it, I was like, yes, because you hear about self-care and you think of, okay, do some yoga, take a bubble bath, light a candle. Fantastic solutions, absolutely. But there are also other things to consider that, when we engage in it fully, can really make us feel whole.
Listen,
So
I would have to live in the bubble bath sometimes. Like,
get
can I
pruning
bring
and
my laptop
everything.
to the bubble bath? Oh no, let me rephrase that. Can I bring my 2 laptops, my phone, and my tablet to the bubble bath?
No, the only electronic you can bring to the bubble bath is the music, right?
But you see, the point, Allison, is that
Yeah.
yes, even though it's a very good tool, it's a temporary tool, and yeah,
Yes.
and that's it's beyond that. So I love that. Thank you so much for answering that question. I know I know we're out of time, but that doesn't mean it has to stop here. If you want to have a workshop with Allison and myself and R.E.S.T Center, please email us at info@restcenters.org. You can pull up your info sheet one more time, Allison,
Oh, for sure.
for contact, and you can also speak with us at restcenters.org on the website, or you can call at 905-863-1118, and you can book your workshop. You can say, hey, I want to be part of a C.M.H. R.E.S.T Center's workshop where you can be part of this live.
Mhm.
And of course, we'll send you a Google form if you have any more questions. And you can also do life skills coaching with R.E.S.T centers. If you're interested in if you're homeless or at risk of homelessness and you're between the ages of 18 to 24, please contact us. We are here to help you. Please,
Mhm.
please, please just call us at 905-863-1118. Or if you're with a caseworker on Ontario Works, just have them contact us. We have referral forms. We're here to help. We are here to help, and you're in the Peel region. Allison, thank you again, and we
Okay.
look forward to doing far more videos of this.
That'd be great. I love it.
Yes.
And anyone who's thinking of a workshop, feel free to let Rebecca know as well, like how you would like a workshop. I'm very flexible. If you can't already tell from my presentation style, I'm pretty informal. So if you want to just, hang out and chat, that's fine. I would even be willing to come and do a workshop of just an activity that's not even related to mental health. If you want to do that, just to kind of bring people together and keep everyone engaged. So there's different levels. It doesn't have to be a formal presentation. So I would love to connect with you. And, for those I don't connect with, I just want to say, I wish you the best as you move forward. And remember that we are in the community, ready and willing to help you out.
Well, let us just confirm right now, we're going to have those workshops. We're going to have those networking sessions where you can come and do an activity, and we'll book it. You listen out, people. Thank you very much. And youth, keep safe, keep healthy, keep well. We're here to help. Just give us a call.